He went from sleeping on friends' couches as a broke plumber to banking over $125 million in a single business deal. But that massive payday might have been the worst thing that ever happened to Conor McGregor, because just 3 years later, he's facing civil court judgments, watching his business empire collapse, and burning through cash faster than he can make it. And what I'm about to reveal will show you exactly how one phone call worth $125 million turned the most feared fighter on the planet into his own worst nightmare. The Conor McGregor the world fell in love with was forged in desperation. But there's one detail about his broke days that will shock you. Before he became the king of trash talk and designer suits, he was grinding as a plumber in Dublin, sometimes sleeping rough when rent money ran short. His girlfriend Dee had to support them both, while he chased an impossible dream that everyone told him to abandon. But here's what nobody talks about. McGregor was so broke that he once had to choose between buying food and paying for gym membership. He chose the gym and went 3 days without eating just to train. Back then, every training session mattered because fighting was his only way out of a life of manual labor and financial struggle. The hunger in his eyes was real because failure meant going back to fixing pipes for the rest of his life, watching other people live the dreams he could only imagine. That desperation forged a weapon that would tear through the UFC like a hurricane. But what happened next reveals the dark side of achieving your wildest dreams. When McGregor stepped into the octagon, he wasn't just fighting his opponent, he was fighting poverty, obscurity, and every person who told him he'd never make it. That raw need for survival made him unpredictable, dangerous, and absolutely unstoppable. He'd spend hours visualizing not just victory, but the lifestyle that victory would bring. The suits, the cars, the respect. It all felt so close he could taste it. But here's the terrifying truth. That same obsession with wealth that drove him to greatness would eventually become the weapon that destroyed everything he built. And the moment it all went wrong is more shocking than you can imagine. The moment everything changed wasn't when he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, or when he choked out Eddie Alvarez to become the first simultaneous two-weight champion. It wasn't even when he made $100 million fighting Floyd Mayweather in that circus boxing match. No, the moment Conor McGregor's soul was sold happened in April 2021, and what transpired during that phone call would haunt him for the rest of his life. He and his partners sold their majority stake in proper number A12 whiskey to Proximo Spirits for a staggering $600 million deal. McGregor personally walked away with at least $125 million, more money than most athletes see in their entire careers. But here's what nobody saw coming. Within minutes of that deal being announced, McGregor made a decision that would destroy everything he'd worked for. He canceled his next training camp. Just like that. The discipline that made him a champion died in the same moment he became filthy rich. Suddenly, the fighter who once counted every penny was swimming in more cash than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But that money came with a hidden cost that's so devastating, it explains every single terrible decision he's made since. And what happened in the first 48 hours after that deal will blow your mind. The transformation was immediate and terrifying to anyone who knew the real McGregor, but the specific changes are more disturbing than anyone realized. The disciplined athlete who used to obsess over every detail of his training camps, who would study footage until his eyes bled, started showing up to events looking more like a party promoter than a professional fighter. But here's the part that nobody talks about. His own training partners started refusing to spar with him because his behavior had become so erratic and unpredictable. His social media went from motivational posts about grinding and sacrifice to endless flexing of watches, cars, and expensive bottles of his own whiskey. Fans who had followed him since the beginning began calling him out for constantly flaunting his millionaire lifestyle, while his fighting career stagnated in the background like a forgotten hobby. But the real wake-up call came when his own mother reportedly begged him to stop embarrassing the family with his public displays. Even she could see what the money was doing to her son. The man who once said he was obsessed with success became obsessed with showing off his success instead. Money had replaced the very hunger that made him unstoppable, and everyone could see it except McGregor himself. But what happened behind closed doors during this period is even more shocking, and it explains why his downfall was inevitable. Training camps became shorter, less intense. The razor-sharp focus that once made him study opponents for months turned into casual preparation that relied more on natural talent than dedicated work. His coaches started making excuses, his team started enabling, and the whole operation shifted from a championship pursuit to a money-making machine designed to keep the lifestyle flowing. But here's the bombshell that nobody saw coming. McGregor started paying sparring partners to take it easy on him because he couldn't handle getting hurt anymore. The corruption went deeper than just laziness or complacency. The same confidence that made McGregor believe he could knock out anyone in the world began to convince him that rules didn't apply to him anymore. When you have $125 million in the bank and everyone around you says yes to everything, reality becomes whatever you want it to be. The discipline that once governed every aspect of his life disappeared, replaced by the toxic belief that money could fix any problem and buy any solution. But what he did next crossed a line that would destroy everything. That delusion was about to be shattered in the most public and devastating way possible, and the timeline of his destruction is more disturbing than anyone imagined. The legal troubles started piling up like a nightmare avalanche that gained momentum with each passing month, but the first warning sign happened years before anyone knew about it. In November 2024, a civil jury found McGregor liable for sexually assaulting Nikita Hand in a Dublin hotel back in 2018. The court ordered him to pay the victim, but that was just the beginning of his problems. Multiple allegations surfaced over the following weeks, creating a timeline of legal issues that painted a disturbing picture of how unlimited wealth and zero accountability had warped his behavior over the years. But here's what makes this story even more explosive. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern that started the moment he got rich. Each scandal chipped away at the empire he'd built, but the real devastation was still coming. What made the situation even more explosive was how McGregor responded to the legal pressure, and his reaction reveals just how completely disconnected from reality he'd become. Instead of showing remorse or taking responsibility, he doubled down on his arrogance, posting cryptic social media messages and making statements that only made his situation worse. His legal team was reportedly begging him to stay quiet, but the man who had built his career on never backing down couldn't help himself. But here's the most insane part. He was actually making his legal situation worse on purpose, because he genuinely believed his money would make all the problems disappear. Every tweet, every public appearance, every defiant statement was like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already consuming everything he'd worked for. And what happened next proves that money can't buy you out of every problem. The business world moved fast and brutal once the verdict hit the headlines, but the speed of his commercial destruction is absolutely staggering. Within days of the civil ruling, Proximo Spirits, the same company that made him $125 million, announced they were dropping McGregor entirely from proper number 12. His face disappeared from promotional materials overnight, and industry insiders estimated he could be losing between $5 to $10 million per month from severed endorsement deals. But here's the kicker that nobody saw coming. Proximo had actually been looking for a way to cut ties with McGregor for months before the verdict, because his behavior had become such a liability that they were afraid to be associated with him. The civil ruling just gave them the perfect excuse to pull the trigger. Other major brands quickly followed suit, creating a domino effect that transformed his money-making machine into a cash-burning disaster. Reebok, who had featured him in major campaigns, quietly removed his content. Video game companies pulled his likeness from upcoming releases. Even smaller Irish businesses that had proudly associated with their hometown hero began distancing themselves from the toxic brand he'd become. The empire built on his image was crumbling because that image had become radioactive, and every day that passed made the financial bleeding worse. The man who once commanded millions per appearance couldn't get booked for a local radio interview. But what happened to his money during this period will absolutely blow your mind. The financial carnage goes deeper than anyone realized, and the numbers are so staggering they'll make your head spin. Court documents revealed that McGregor isn't just paying the initial civil judgment, he's also covering the bulk of an estimated fortune in legal costs that keep climbing with each new case. High-profile attorneys don't come cheap, and when you're facing multiple allegations across different jurisdictions, the bills add up faster than a casino jackpot. But Here's the most shocking revelation of all. Reports now suggest he's down by over $100 million from his peak net worth. And the rate at which he's burning through cash is accelerating every month. We're talking about a man who's losing more money per week than most people make in their entire lives. This forced him into desperate comeback talks just to keep the lifestyle afloat. But the pressure is showing in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. McGregor, who once bought Lamborghinis on a whim, was reportedly shopping around his mansion and yacht to raise quick cash. Friends close to the situation claim he's been hitting up former business partners for loans, something that would have been laughable when he was riding high on whiskey money. The man who once fought for glory was now fighting just to pay his bills. And the desperation was showing in every public appearance and social media outburst. But what this is doing to his family is the most heartbreaking part of this entire story. What makes this downfall even more tragic is watching how it's affecting the people around him, and these details will break your heart. His longtime partner Dee, who stuck with him through the poorest days, now has to watch their children grow up with a father whose name has become synonymous with scandal. His training partners see a shell of the warrior they once looked up to. Even his mother, who was so proud when her son became world champion, now has to field phone calls from reporters asking about her son's latest legal trouble. The money was supposed to secure his family's future, but instead, it's destroying their present. And the psychological damage being done to McGregor himself is even more disturbing than the financial losses. The saddest part isn't the money he lost. It's what the money did to the person he became, and the transformation is more complete than anyone realized. The Conor McGregor who tapped out against Khabib in 2018 had already been defeated long before he stepped into that octagon, crushed under the weight of fame and fortune that he couldn't handle. The warrior mentality that made him champion had been replaced by an entitled mindset that viewed the world as something to be conquered rather than respected. Recent scandals involving erratic social media behavior, inappropriate conduct, and public meltdowns show a man completely disconnected from the disciplined fighter who once inspired millions. But here's what's most terrifying about his current state. People close to him say he genuinely doesn't understand why his life is falling apart. Industry experts who've watched his career from the beginning point to the whiskey money as the turning point where everything went wrong, but their analysis reveals something even more disturbing about the psychology of instant wealth. Before that deal, McGregor still had to perform to maintain his lifestyle. He still needed to fight, to win, to stay relevant in order to keep the checks coming. But once he had $125 million guaranteed, the motivation disappeared completely. Why risk brain damage in the octagon when you could make more money selling bottles at nightclub appearances? Why maintain the strict discipline of a professional athlete when you could party like a rock star and still afford anything you wanted? But here's the part that explains everything. McGregor didn't just lose his motivation to fight. He lost his ability to handle any kind of adversity at all. The psychology of sudden wealth is something that destroys more people than it saves. And McGregor's story is becoming a textbook example of how money amplifies every personality flaw rather than fixing them. The confidence became arrogance. The ambition became greed. The self-belief became delusion. Every negative trait that was once kept in check by necessity and consequence was suddenly freed to run wild, backed by unlimited resources and surrounded by enablers who profited from keeping him happy rather than keeping him grounded. But the most devastating part of this entire story is what it reveals about the nature of success itself, and this final revelation will change how you think about money forever. Looking at McGregor today, you're witnessing one of the most tragic examples of how money doesn't solve problems. It amplifies them beyond recognition. The same drive that made him a champion became self-destructive when redirected toward wealth instead of wins. His story serves as a brutal reminder that sometimes getting everything you think you want is the worst thing that can happen to you. The hunger that forged a legend died the moment that hunger was satisfied, and what emerged from the ashes wasn't a fulfilled champion, but a cautionary tale about the corrupting power of instant wealth. Whether there's any way back from this financial and personal wreckage remains to be seen. Redemption stories do exist in combat sports, but they usually require the kind of humility and self-reflection that McGregor has shown no signs of embracing. The man who conquered the UFC, who changed the entire landscape of mixed martial arts, who inspired a generation of fighters to dream bigger. That man is still in there somewhere, but he's buried under so much money, ego, and legal trouble that finding him might be the hardest fight of Conor McGregor's life. And this time, he can't solve the problem by throwing punches or throwing money at it. This time, the opponent he needs to defeat is the person he's become. The question is, does he even want to win that fight anymore?